Hello and welcome to This Date in History, aka T.D.H. This show is all about the events that occurred today in years past, both recognized by actual historians, but mainly things I personally find intriguing enough for me to bring to you. The source of this information comes from the smart device application Today in History on this day. For links to the app, music, and anything else potentially interesting, check the underbar. Anyway, on with the show! Today is Wednesday, aka Wednesday, May 2nd, 2018. In 1536, Anne Boleyn, Queen of England, was arrested and imprisoned on charges of adultery, incest, treason, and witchcraft. They really wanted her. I hope that divorce was worth it. In 1611, the King James Version of the Bible was published for the first time by printer Robert Barker in London, England. In 1670, King Charles II of England granted a permanent charter to the Hudson's Bay Company to open the fur trade in North America. In 1808, the people of Madrid rose up in rebellion against French occupation. Francisco de Goya later memorialized this event in his painting The 2nd of May, 1808. Just 4 years later, in 1812, the siege of Cuautla during the Mexican War of Independence ended with both sides claiming victory after Mexican rebels, under Jose Maria Morelos y Pavon, abandoned the city after 72 days under siege by royalist Spanish troops under Felix Maria Calleja. In 1829, after anchoring nearby, Captain Charles Fremantle of HMS Challenger declared the Swan River colony in Australia. In 1863, during the American Civil War, Stonewall Jackson was wounded by friendly fire while returning from camp after reconnoitering during the Battle of Chancellorsville, only to succumb to pneumonia 8 days later. In 1879, the Spanish Socialist Workers' Party was founded in Madrid by Pablo Iglesias. In 1885, Kreyn and Assiniboine warriors won the Battle of Cut Knife, which became their largest victory over Canadian forces during the Northwest Rebellion. Just 4 years later, in 1889, Menelik II, Emperor of Ethiopia, signed the Treaty of Wuchal, giving Italy control over Eritrea. In 1918, General Motors, aka Government Motors, acquired the Chevrolet Motor Company of Delaware. 2 years after that, in 1920, the first game of the Negro National League Baseball was played in Indianapolis. In 1933, Germany's independent labor unions were replaced by the German Labor Front. In 1941, following the coup d'etat against Iraq Crown Prince Abd al-Elah earlier that year, the United Kingdom launched the Anglo-Iraqi War to restore him to power. Once again, 4 articles in World War II. Let's begin. 1945, the Soviet Union announced the fall of Berlin. The surrender of Caserta came into effect, resulting in the cease of fighting by German troops in Italy. The U.S. 82nd Airborne Division liberated Wavelian concentration camp, finding 1,000 dead prisoners, most of which starved to death. And the last article of 1945 pertaining to World War II, several hundred prisoners were saved when their death march from Dachau to the Austrian border was halted by the segregated Al-Nasi 522nd Field Artillery Battalion of the U.S. Army in southern Bavaria. In 1952, the world's first ever jet airliner, the de Havilland Comet 1, made its maiden flight, flying from London to Johannesburg. 11 years after that, in 1963, Berthold Seliger launched a rocket with 3 stages and a maximum flight altitude of over 100 kilometers near Cuxhaven. This rocket became the only sounding rocket to be developed in Germany. The year after that, in 1964, during the Vietnam War, an explosion sunk the U.S. aircraft carrier USS Card while it was docked at Saigon. It was later discovered that 2 Viet Cong combat swimmers had placed explosives on the ship's hull. She was later raised and returned to service. In 1986, during the Chernobyl disaster, the city of Chernobyl was evacuated 6 days after the incident. In 1989, during the Cold War, Hungary began dismantling its border fence with Austria, which allowed a number of East Germans to defect. In 1998, the European Central Bank was founded in Brussels in order to define and execute the European Union's monetary policy. In 1999, Maria Massaco became the first female to be elected president of Panama. The year after that, in 2000, President Bill Clinton announced that accurate GPS access would no longer be restricted to the United States military. In 2008, Cyclone Nargis made landfall in Burma, causing the deaths of over 138,000 people and leaving millions of others houseless. Also in 2008, a Shaitan volcano began erupting in Chile, forcing the evacuation of over 4,500 people. In 2012, a pastel version of The Scream by Norwegian painter Edvard Munch sold for $120 million in a New York City auction, setting a new world record for a work of art auction. And 2 years after that, in 2014, 2 mudslides in Pakistan, Afghanistan, left up to 2,500 people missing. Births: Judge Dredd, 1945, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, 1972. Deaths: Leonardo da Vinci, 1519. And that concludes the show. Once again, check the underbar for any links you may be interested in for your dose of past events daily. I am Xander, and you are you. Toodles!